Well, hello and welcome back to Rare Classic Cars. Today, a vehicle that you have not seen in a good long while, and that is my 1959 Pontiac Parisienne. Now, Parisienne, you say, what in the world is that? Well, as you can see here, it does say Parisienne. No Bonneville, no Catalina here, and you have Parisienne there. So what gives with this car? Well, this is a Canadian vehicle and was also an export model into other markets. And it has a lot of quirks and idiosyncrasies because it's kind of a Frankenstein car. Now, all the way up until the mid-1970s, Pontiac in Canada would sell cars like the Parisienne or the Laurentian that were different from U.S. cars in quite a few fundamental ways. They looked the same, but underneath they were not the same. And this holds true, obviously, for this car as well. And the reason for that was that Pontiac was really the volume seller in Canada. The dealer network for Pontiac exceeded Chevrolet back during this time frame. And Pontiac was really the main brand from General Motors. You really only got a Chevrolet if you were destitute and you really had, let's say, financial troubles. Pontiac was what you went after otherwise. And that was true all the way up until Pontiac ended in Canada when General Motors went bankrupt. So Pontiac was a huge name brand in Canada. It's kind of sad that it's gone in the U.S. It was even more of a name brand in Canada. So let's talk a little bit about the Parisienne. Now, the first thing that you're going to see as you're looking from this angle is the wheels here are inset significantly, both the front and the rear. And you might be saying, I thought this was the wide track Pontiac. Well, in the U.S. it was. In Canada it was the narrow track Pontiac. And why is that? This car rides atop Chevrolet running gear and a Chevrolet X-frame. So in order to save money, get economies of scale, build these things down the same line, the Pontiac rides atop the Chevrolet chassis. And that means that it has a 119-inch wheelbase. If you got the short wheelbase Pontiacs like the Catalina, they rode atop a 122-inch wheelbase. The Bonnevilles rode atop a 124-inch wheelbase. This one does not even ride atop either of those. It rides atop a 119-inch wheelbase. And the funny thing is, you can kind of see that. If you stand here, notice that particularly this back wheel is not in the center of the wheel arch. It's too far forward. And that's because the wheelbase was shorter on these Canadian Pontiacs than the U.S. Pontiacs. And you also have, like I said, the wheels inset because this is not the wide track Pontiac. Now in the U.S. you had this styling up front, the bumper that flares outboard, which would have probably looked fine with this wheel further outboard, but here it looks humorously overbodied, like my friend John Manugian would say, a hippo on roller skates. So this is the short wheelbase, and the Parisienne is effectively the short body for Pontiac, the Catalina body in terms of the overall length, with the Bonneville side trim, these pot metal pieces that you see here as an example. And even out back, you don't have the Bonneville tail lamps. You have smaller tail lamps that really mirrored that of the Catalina. Now, another interesting quirk about this car, reverse lights were optional back during this time. So you just have a plug. This car doesn't have the optional reverse lights. There are no reverse lights on this car. I do think it's cool that designers integrated the fuel fill door here in the back. And in talking to some designers of the period, this was designed in this car was designed really in 1957-ish, back when General Motors designers saw the Chrysler forward look cars that were going to come out for 1957. They did a total melt and repour on their 59s. And apparently, as the designers were working on these fins, they wanted something unique for Pontiac. And one designer remarked that they look like cat's ears, and they kind of do. It does kind of look like some sort of a cat's ear here. Now, as part of that, the fact that these cars had to be redesigned in such a short period of time, they share quite a few components. So whether you got the Chevrolet, the Pontiac, the Olds, the Buick, the Cadillac, you have this wraparound backlight on the Vista hardtops. You've got similar roof panels, similar front glass. And in fact, the doors, Buick was the pattern for all of the doors. And so they had, each designer or design team had to integrate the form language of this front door into the rest of the car. and make it look different. So this is the same, as an example, on the Buick, and the form is the same. And you can see here the designers just added this, or the manufacturing engineers added an applique here. It was too hard to stamp the metal, so they just tacked this applique on and created the start of this fin in the back that kind of goes all the way and terminates here at the very rear of the car. Now, other curiosities on this is a four-door hardtop. General Motors Fisher Body was really one of the first that had the four-door hardtop. They weren't the first, and there's debate as to what really constitutes the first four-door hardtop. Some might even say the Roll or the Kaiser. There's various debates about that. But clearly this is a hardtop. It's an early hardtop, and I do love the motion that the rear back glass goes through as it kind of goes down. No, that is not a broken window regulator. This glass kind of pivots up and then back as it goes upward, and it does the same obviously in the other direction as it goes downward. So it kind of gets the back glass away from this window seal. If the front window's still up, it kind of quickly moves this glass rearward and then starts tipping it away so you're not rubbing on that window frame for the front glass, but kind of a humorous motion that you have on this. By the way, the door closures, GM in later years, I don't know what happened in the 60s and 70s. They just couldn't get door closures right. But on this car, you know, you just, and it closes perfectly. All the doors on this car. I mean, with a great sound. So as we go inside, or maybe I'll show you like the X-frame. So this is the Chevrolet X-frame under here. And that X-frame, the last GM car to use the X-frame would be the 1970 Riviera, I believe. So GM used X-frames for some time. You can appreciate, though, that in side impact, like here, there's no frame. And this is really not a substantial pillar in the middle either. Now, this is a 17,000-mile car. I got this on Kijiji. It's hard to believe, 11 years ago. And you can see made in General Motors Canada in Oshawa. General Motors of Canada Limited. This isn't even acrylic lacquer paint. This is a cheaper paint. This is the original paint on this car. And, you know, it still looks pretty good. I'm not going to repaint it because it's got some patina to it, but, I mean, you can see the reflection. It's still quite good. Is it perfect? No. And are there, you know, little boo-boos and things like that? But the car is absolutely rust-free. I found it in Kijiji in Canada back then. In fact, there's even a little oil change sticker. From 1973, the mileage was 14,718. And it's got 17,000 miles now in 2026. And I've probably put 1,500 or 2,000 on that since I've owned it. So it's a great, fun car. Now inside, you have a beautiful upholstery. This is the original upholstery. This has not been reupholstered. It did have seat covers on it, which I took off. Another quirky thing, notice this is really a legs-out seating position in this car. GM, the designers, later admitted when they redid these cars for 1961 to 1964 that they went too far with lowering the cowl height. This is the longer, lower, wider philosophy, and this car is low. And beyond the overall height of the car being low, the H-point is low. You're basically sitting on the floor in a legs-out position. And it's comfortable, and I think that's why they got away with it. But a lot of buyers just didn't like sitting that low, so the 61 to 64 has corrected that. Now, if you notice, you also have the Chevrolet steering column and wheel, and this does have a power glide. We'll talk about the engine in a second and the transmission. But you have the gear shift lever, the accelerator, the brake pedal from a Chevrolet. So the rest of the dash is Pontiac. And if we sit in here, you can see 17,581 miles. I do like, this is the ashtray here that I think goes down like this. There we go. So there's the ashtray. This is the glove box. And then you have that grab handle. These kick panels are just painted cardboard. It's hard to believe, but that's all they are. It's just painted cardboard. And, I guess it works. It's still here all these years later. This car does not have air conditioning. It does have the optional AM radio, which you have to turn on, and I don't have the antenna up, so it's just going to be static. But you got to wait about 5 seconds for the tubes to warm up, and then the one speaker on the dash will start making some noise. So back in the day where you actually had to warm up the tubes in your radio, unfortunately it's just static. Yeah. Got to put the antenna up. Now, a little trivia. Do you see those little triangular circle symbols in between the 5 and the 7 and the 11 and the 13? Like right here. Anybody know what that's for? Those were the civil defense radio stations. Remember, this was during the time where the government and people were concerned about nuclear war, and if there were some attack or something, you could tune into those stations, and that was where you got your information related to civil defense. So you certainly don't see that anymore, but you see that in other radios of the period in other division cars as well. One nice thing, they do have this keyhole is backlit at night. You can't see it, but when you put the parking lights on, that keyhole is actually backlit. You can see the pull vent handles there for the vent doors and the kick well. No day-night mirror here. There's no flipper. This mirror still comes down from the ceiling. I think the Thunderbird was the first car to have the mirror attached to the windshield. So until this point, it was still something that was attached to the headliner, like you can see here. And it actually works because the mirror is slightly tinted, and I don't really miss the flipper. It's a great idea. I don't know why they don't just make the mirror slightly tinted like this, and you don't even have to worry about flipping it between day and night. Of course, now they're auto dimming and all that fancy stuff. And just beautiful interior. And look at that wraparound backlight. Wow. I love the styling theme of the interior as well. You do have the cold light. The engine is warm, so it won't come on. But let's take a look under the hood. I should point out this car does not have the optional windshield washer. This is the windshield wiper control. You turn it for low and high speed and then off. If this button had popped out, that would be the button for the windshield washer. But since this car doesn't have it, that button is just permanently depressed in there. This is the headlamp switch. This is the cigarette lighter over here. Not bad. Not many people smoked in this car. It doesn't smell like smoke. Beautiful door panel, by the way. Real stitching. Lots of bright work and trim. The armrest is even held up well, just showing the low mileage. And again, the doors just close like butter. I love this front emblem, how it looks like it's made awake. It's just slipping down the front of the hood, but didn't quite drop off. Now, because this rides atop a Chevrolet chassis, that means you got Chevrolet running gear. But no, this is not the 235 that was in the Impala that made, I think, 135 horsepower, which was the standard engine. This is a 261 cubic inch variant of that engine, a little bit bigger. It was used in U.S. medium-duty trucks, some buses, and this was the standard engine in Canadian Pontiacs for a long time. I think they called it the Strato 6. And that Impala 235 made 135 horsepower. This made 150, 155 gross. And one of the ways you can tell if you have a 261 versus a 235 is, see down there, the little captain's bars? That tells you it's a 261 block. And the distributor rotates as the vacuum changes. The vacuum advance actually moves physically the distributor externally, not internally. Of course, there's no PCV valve on this car. It's just a breather that exhausts the blow-by out on the bottom. You got the fuel pump. And then I love over here on the air cleaner, it says Pontiac. Well, yes, I guess. It's Pontiac in Canada. Single chamber master cylinder. which, works fine. The emergency brake on this car works. Any car I have with the single chamber master cylinder, I make sure the emergency brake works. Let's start it up. You can see how smooth this engine is. Just purrs. I wonder if I can show you the distributor. This might be a little hard. If I rev it up here, watch. See it move? Fan's a little noisy because there's not a declutching fan. But wow, what a little sweetheart engine. One barrel, single barrel, big single barrel carburetor on these. Good torque. You do have, like I said, the Rochester single barrel carburetor, very reliable. Interestingly, when I first got this car, when you would turn around a corner, in some cases, the engine would die. And the owner couldn't figure out what was going on. And to his credit, he actually had set the carburetor foot level according to the factory specs that were published. But the factory specs were wrong. And what was happening is the float level was too high, and the gas would just spill into the Venturi and it would stall the engine. So just kept lowering the float level a little bit until I didn't have that problem anymore. Still have the voltage regulator, still have the original chalk mark. The car overall, look at the control arms, just in great shape. This engine was actually painted green originally. The previous owner didn't like that. He thought it looked funny under hood in a blue car, and I kind of agree with him. And nobody knows anyway, when you go to a car show, you never see these engines in Pontiacs. So I think this looks a lot better. He did chrome the valve cover, which I think looks nice. That would have just been painted like a seafoam green from stock. But even the hood, there's some light, rust pitting and things. Look, this car was never, I don't think, in a climate-controlled garage. It was always garaged. Even the hood pad is in pretty decent shape. And one thing that's crazy to me is the hood overslam area here is de minimis. It's like a 2 millimeter gap there. Can barely get a fingernail in, but Pontiac did that for years on those hood overslam gaps. You do, of course, have the real metal grill, no plastic here. I think this little tip of the Pontiac snagged on somebody's cloth when they were washing it. If anybody's got a spare one of these, I wouldn't mind buying it off of you just so that it could be brand new. But overall, it's just a fun car to drive. And nobody knows really out here in the US what in the world a Parisienne is. Maybe we'll just go and take it around the block for a minute. This might be a little hard because there's no power steering in this car. You hear that power glide whine in neutral or park? That's typical of all these old cast iron power glides. It just tells you it's working. And in this car, power glides only have one shift. It's just 2 gears. So I always find myself waiting for the second shift and it never comes. This is not a great freeway cruising car because the rear end ratio is probably a 3.55 or something like that to 1. And I would say the top speed is probably redline limited to 75 miles an hour as a result. This is a low RPM engine in this car. But it's pretty torquey. Around town. Doesn't have a lot of horsepower if you floor it. But you get up to speed just fine. So there you have it. My 1959 Pontiac Parisienne. I still can't get used to just that single shift. Great view over the hood too with those little trim pieces at the end as well. Thanks again for watching.